My name is Logan Swale, with my group members Taylor, Brady, Marcus, and today we're going to talk a little bit more about what we did. So to get started with why we chose this, we wanted to look into our screen times and how it affects our health and see if there's any negative correlation with what we're doing. And if you look at this picture that I have on the screen, it says that 75.4% of people say they do have an addiction to their cell phones, and which is very interesting because if you ask somebody or anybody in this room, if you asked if you have an addiction to your cell phone, probably most of us would say no. I probably use it a normal amount, but we don't really actually see how much we use our phones. If I were to set my phone down and say I won't use it for the rest of the day, I feel like that'd be pretty hard for me just to not touch it. A healthy amount of screen time. The Mayo Health Clinic says that we should be using our screens around 2 to 4 hours a day, roughly. And the National Library of Health stated that the average amount of screen time is around 4 to 8 hours that we are actually using our phones, which is a pretty significant difference when you think about it. We're using almost double the amount of recommended time that we're allowed, which is why we looked into this and see if there's any mental health problems. What I mean by mental health is, are we using our phones to get away from our problems like stress and anxiety and depression? Are we just trying to hide from the real world just by gluing ourselves to our phones? So yeah, are we using our technology too much?
All right, so to start off, I'm gonna go through our hypotheses, and then I'm gonna cover our research questions on the next slide. So our hypotheses are the following. Number 1, screen time decreases sleep quality. And number 2, cell phone usage with 4 or more hours are more likely to have developed mental health disorders. So, go back. So we found this, there's a bunch of different studies done on this already, but we haven't seen too much done on college students. So we wanted to figure out if this correlates to college students as well as the rest of the population. Next. So our research questions, the first one, how does screen time affect the overall health of young adults? We focused on 2 different factors of health. The first one being sleep. So we all know how important sleep is to our overall health, and there is a proven fact that blue light that comes from our phones decreases our sleep hormone, which eventually leads to decreased sleep quality, and it could be hard to fall asleep. And the second factor, mental health. So there's also been studies that suggesting that mental health can lead to, that more screen time can lead to anxiety and other health disorders. So we also wanted to see with our research if this correlates to college students. So our second research questions, how can companies involved with the production of cell phones help eliminate issues in regards to screen time without hurting their own profit? This one's a little tricky because companies like Apple, they don't want their consumers to use their products less, but they've taken some steps in the right direction with adding the screen time trackers on our phones, which shows us a bunch of different data, like our most used app, how much time we spend on it, and our total screen time and weekly average. The second thing is downtime, where you can schedule a downtime on your phone where you can't really touch your phone, which can eventually help you decrease your screen time. I'm going to pass it over to Taylor, who's going to talk about our sample.
So we drew our sample from a population of college students. That was our population, and then specifically our sample was NMU undergrad students, primarily from the ages 18 to 24. And the reason that we chose this sample was because there wasn't a lot of research done on screen time and the effects of it in this particular age range. And it's really important because we are one of the age ranges that uses our phones and technology more than anyone else. So knowing the impacts that this could have on us is really important. We wanted our sample to be around 300 participants so that way we could keep our standard error around 5%. And we sourced our samples from email lists and Also, social media, we posted on Facebook and Instagram stories. And what we actually obtained was about 178 responses, which was lower than anticipated, which would have skewed our error. However, I don't believe this was due to a lack of distribution of our survey rather than a lack of willingness to take our survey. I know there are a lot of research classes putting surveys out right now. Maybe they got worn out or whatever the reason may be. I think people just weren't really wanting to take it.
So I'll be talking about the methods that we use to figure out some of our results. So the purpose of our study was to determine how smartphones and the use of our screens kind of affect our mental health and sleep quality, and then on college students, like Taylor had mentioned. The methods that we attempted to use were the t-test and the regression analysis. And the results of our data presented us with no direct correlation that would tie to the use of screen time and the effect that it had on mental health. One of the things that we think could have been an issue while taking our survey was potentially a user error or potentially our fault for developing the survey itself. We had one question that stated that it gave the survey taker an ability to type in the response instead of choosing a direct response. So the picture on the top right shows some of the examples. So it's like people would say 5 hours or 5 and just spell it out. So that was just one of the issues that we occurred during our study. Other than that, while we conducted our test, we did not find any correlation directly correlated to our data.
So just to add on to what Brady said, I wanted to clarify, we actually don't have tests to show you guys. All of our data had to be sorted through manually because we gave the option of choice tests on our survey, so we weren't able to use it in SPSS.
For scripted interpretation, our current behavior from the data that we were somewhat ordered to figure out, we found that there wasn't much of a difference between male and female, and the age was all pretty standard for college students, around 18 to 21 to 24-ish. There was a pretty evenly split 50-50 between what we found, so there wasn't really much we could go off of. So what we can say about the future behavior is that we could see a possible increase between the ages and genders, just because every day there's always something new coming out. Like I know Apple's currently developing glasses that we wear that are basically our phones. So we're literally gonna have our screens directly in front of us 24/7 at that point, if that ever becomes something we use on a daily basis. So technology never stops growing. So we could definitely see an increase if we were to take this survey again 20 years later or something.
All right, so I'm going to be diving deeper into our survey. The purpose of our survey was to test our hypotheses on college students about screen time and then leading to their sleep quality and mental health. We had 14 questions that started off with finding the demographics of the survey taker, such as their age, gender, and class status. And then another big part of our survey was Apple's application screen time. That can show, as we talked about before, what apps you use, how long you've been on your phone, and it works for Galaxy too. But after looking at the results of our survey, about 91% of people that took our survey had Apple iPhones, which is pretty crazy that they own that much of the market. Then we also made sure to show in the introduction of our survey that it's all confidential information. You can withdraw at any time. And then people also left a lot of blanks, so they must have respected that or just never finished taking the survey. Next slide. All right, so moving on to the results and findings. The demographics of our students, or the respondents, is we had 178 respondents. They were mostly, we think, NMU athletes. 4 of us are athletes, and we shared it to a lot of our friends and other teams. So that might have skewed our data a little bit too. 68% were males, 31% were females, and then it was a very diverse class for the students, very diverse from every class. It was from freshman to senior, about 20 to 30% in each category. The demographics did not show many patterns. We tried to figure out if, looking at male and female, if one that had screen time more led to them having more sleep problems, but it was almost exactly even. And then also looking at the age, 72% of the respondents were 18 to 21, 23% were 22 to 25, so it was on the younger side, which is what we wanted. And then overall, our hypotheses were both rejected. People that had screen time that 7 to 8 hours even, some of them showed that they had no mental problems or stress, and their sleep quality was perfectly fine. So it was really up in the air. Next slide. And then more results and findings. These are just some of the questions that were answered that we think we could build off in the future if we did this again. The average time spent on social media, on screen time was 4.5 hours, which is higher than the recommended 2 to 4. We had a different question that asked to rank your most used apps. And the most used apps were definitely Snapchat and Instagram. And then following after that was TikTok and YouTube. The average time used on your most used app was 2.7 hours, which is a pretty crazy fact that somebody on just one app would use that much time, which is another thing I think we could look into farther if we were to do this survey again. Sleep quality was the next question that I'm gonna go over, and we asked people to rate their sleep quality from 1 to 7, and the average of everyone was 4.6, 7 being the best sleep quality, so people are sleeping pretty good. Then stress levels, 1 to 7, 7 being the most stressed, the average was 3.7, which is almost directly in the middle. And then lastly, I talked about putting the phone down before going to bed. 71% of the respondents said that they don't put their phone down before going to bed 30 minutes prior to. So that can cause a lot of problems. Marcus talked about blue light and screen time, or blue light keeping you up and not releasing the hormone in your body to go to bed. So I really think that does cause problems with sleeping. Whether students know it or not, we still do think that screen time affects sleep and mental health, but they answered from their perspective, which might not be exactly correct.
So I'm going to go over the implications of our research. To begin, previous research on this study has mostly been done on children because parents are concerned, how does screen time impact my child? How does it impact their learning? And so previous research has led to new developments such as the screen time feature on Apple and Android. This being said, our survey was important because, as I said before, as screen time continues to increase, it's good to know and it's valuable information to know how in the long run this is going to affect us. It really affects everyone who uses technology. And we also collected data for a new age group. So although we didn't have anything super solid, and at the moment we're not able to analyze a ton of our research, it does provide a stepping stone for future research. So they can look at trends, they can look at our survey and the mistakes that we made and fix that. And I do think that there is kind of a stepping stone there for future research. And going off of that, we do suggest that future research do be done on the topic because it is important, and we all know that we use our phones a lot, and there's no way that there are no effects of screen time. And we plan on our end of furthering our research, we plan to reanalyze our data and see if we can find any stronger trends and see if we can use our data to come up with some more conclusions specifically for our final paper. And for other people who are considering doing research on screen time, we suggest using a larger sample. 178 responses isn't necessarily representative of the whole population of people 18 to 24 attending colleges. So to conclude, as Brady kind of touched on, we do think that screen time is still something that we should look into, and although we didn't get significant results, we think that our data is valuable and can be used to further the research on the topic. So at this point, we would like to open it up to any questions that you might have for us.